Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are strapping in for what is essentially a mission briefing into the most critical yet often overlooked layer of communication security.
Accountability.
Exactly, accountability. We're navigating the, let's be honest, the dense world of the EKMS material. This is the foundation of COM-SE policy.
Right.
And we're going to be focusing specifically on that gray area of security failures known as practices dangerous to security, or PDSs.
That's right. And look, if you are out there preparing for a major audit, or maybe you're drafting a policy memo, or you're just taking over a ComSec account for the first time, this dive is structured for you.
Okay, so this is very much a practical guide.
Absolutely. Think of it as passing the course on procedural rigor. Our goal today is to move beyond just the simple definitions. We want to focus entirely on the operational why and that cause and effect relationship.
So if you do this thing,
then you must follow that mandated procedure. It's that simple.
Our mission then is clarity. We really need to distinguish between, say, a routine error that just demands some internal paperwork and a catastrophic security incident that, triggers a full national alert.
And understanding PDSs is foundational. I can't stress that enough.
Yeah.
Because these are the small gaps. They're the low-hanging fruit that inspectors look for.
And they're the ones that lead to bigger problems down the line.
If they're allowed to persist, they absolutely lead to major breaches every time.
So let's start with the absolute core distinction. For someone writing that policy memo, what is a PDS?
Okay, so it's defined as a practice that has the potential to jeopardize the security of ComSec material.
Potential, that's the keyword.
That is the keyword, if allowed to perpetuate. And here's the crucial difference, the procedural escape hatch, if you will.
Okay.
PDSs are those practices that do not require immediate reporting to the National Security Agency, to the NSA.
So they're solvable at a lower level.
They are solvable at the command level, provided, and this is a big provided, you follow some very rigorous internal documentation rules.
So to be clear, the material itself hasn't been compromised. The vulnerability is really in the breakdown of the administrative and the physical control structure.
Precisely. It's a proactive management approach. And honestly, it's brilliant, but it relies entirely on the people in the account being meticulously trained.
Which brings us to our first mandatory takeaway, I imagine.
It does. And this is non-negotiable. All accounts must conduct annual PDS familiarization training.
This isn't a suggestion.
No, it's a requirement. You have to review and discuss this chapter per your command directives, and critically, you must keep documentation of that training locally.
And what happens if you don't? If that paperwork is missing when an inspector shows up?
Well, the inspector doesn't see it as a training failure. They see it as an immediate PDS finding in and of itself.
So you're compounding the risk.
You're compounding the risk before they've even looked at your inventory.
Okay, let's unpack this. A PDS is about potential risk, not confirmed compromise. And that annual training is an absolute must-have.
Right.
So if we look at the universe of all the possible errors you could make, the material says they fall into two distinct buckets. This seems like the bedrock of any policy response, right?
It is. This is the first critical distinction. Bucket 1 is the vast majority of them. Category 1, which are the non-reportable PDSs.
And these are the internal administrative failures, basically.
They are, yeah.
So you discover a non-reportable PDS. What is the mandated effect? What do you have to do?
The effect is internal correction and reporting. So they have to be documented at the unit level using a formal memorandum.
Not just a sticky note.
Oh, definitely not. A formal memo. And it gets reported directly to the commanding officer, the CO of the account, and the supporting COM-SEC account manager.
But it doesn't go outside the command.
It does not go outside the command. The whole goal of the documentation is to support the local elements, we call them LEs, the users who physically handle the equipment, and it allows management to detect negative trends before they escalate into something worse.
Okay, got it. So internal memo, CO gets notified, and you use it for local trend tracking. It's really a mechanism for continuous improvement.
That's the idea.
Now, what about category 2? Reportable PDSs. These sound significantly more serious. What makes an error reportable externally?
Reportable PDSs, they involve failures that impact things at a much higher level. We're talking national level resource management, or they might signal a significant breach of control procedures that the wider COM-SASC community needs to be aware of immediately.
So it's something that affects more than just your local command.
Exactly. So while they're still documented internally, just like a Category 1, they also require external reporting outside the command structure, usually via a record message.
And that rapid communication is vital, I assume?
It is, because these PDSs, they often touch on systemic issues like fundamental compromises to the security baseline, or maybe an inadvertent destruction that requires national resupply. Someone else has to get involved to fix it.
So the procedural difference really determines the gravity of the situation.
It does.
If the failure needs external coordination to fix, like getting more material or alerting the whole community to a parameter change, it becomes Category 2.
Right. But if it's just a documentation gap, something that can be fixed with a few signatures and a memo, it stays Category 1.
Okay. The overarching principle seems to be a PDS is discovered, that's the cause.
And that discovery mandates documentation and a specific reporting procedure. That's the effect.
And that annual training is designed to make sure everyone from the CO all the way down to the technician knows exactly which effect follows which cause.
That's the goal.
All right, now let's drill down into the details. This is what people studying for an exam really need. The source material lists 23 specific examples of non-reportable PDSs.
23 of them, yeah.
We can't just rattle them off like a list. We need to understand the underlying accountability concepts for each one. Let's start with the paperwork mistakes, documentation and accounting errors. That's PDSs 1 through 4.
Right. And these are the administrative failures that, really break the chain of custody. PDS number 1 is improperly completed accounting reports.
That seems so mundane. Why is a missing signature or an incomplete short title a practice dangerous to security? What's the real risk?
Well, because that accounting report, it could be an SF-153, which is a transfer or disruption report, or an SF-25 that is the legal record of custody.
Okay.
If you have an unauthorized signature, you cannot legally prove who took responsibility for that material. If you have missing or incomplete short title information, the material's identity itself becomes ambiguous.
So it undermines the whole system.
It undermines the legal defensibility of the entire accountability system. Imagine if that material goes missing 6 months later. That flaw, that PDS, makes it almost impossible to go back and find the exact moment custody was lost.
It turns a verifiable audit trail into a hole in the record. I see. Okay, PDS number 2 deals with the physical material during a transfer. Fiscal, MSE, keying material transfer with status marking still intact.
Yeah, this is a critical nuance of inventory management. So keying material is often labeled with its status, right? It could be effective, which means it's currently in use.
Right.
Or superseded, meaning it's expired and waiting for destruction. Or it could be in reserve, just held for future use.
Okay, so let's say I'm the main account manager.
Yeah.
I'm transferring reserve material to you, a local element.
Right. If you transfer it to me but you leave your reserve status marking on it, you're essentially imposing your inventory management on me.
And why is that a problem?
Because my operational needs might require me to immediately place that material into effective status. Leaving your markings on it creates confusion in my local log. It could lead to material being used incorrectly or maybe destroyed prematurely.
So the rule is you have to wipe the slate clean for the next person.
Yeah. When you transfer material, you must obliterate the status markings so the receiving party can accurately establish their own local status. Failure to do that is a PDS because it compromises accurate inventory control.
Got it. PDS number 3 is where these administrative errors meet the digital world, and the risk, I imagine, escalates very quickly.
It really does. This one is mailing, faxing, or scanning classified information via non-secure methods. And this applies even if it's just the classified accounting documents themselves.
We have to pause here because this has to be a frequent pitfall. People forget that the paperwork about the classified material can be classified itself.
That is the number one thing. They forget that. The paperwork might contain classified information like accounting serial numbers or classified short titles. If you send that document over NIPRNet, the non-classified Internet Protocol Router Network, or a non-secure fax,
You're transmitting classified data over an unclassified line.
you are. And here is the key procedural detail, that cause and effect that can turn a simple PDS into a potential incident.
What's the escalation?
If that classified accounting document is passed electronically over NIPRNet, it requires a full report of spillage.
Oh, wow.
And that spillage report is governed by completely separate regulations. So that simple act of scanning an accounting form and emailing it transforms what started as a PDS, a poor practice, into a fully reportable spillage incident.
That is a crucial distinction for anyone writing a policy memo. It shows how a low-level error can trigger a high-level reporting mandate.
It's the perfect example of procedural escalation.
Okay, PDS number 4. This one addresses a record misalignment, which I bet is common in big decentralized commands.
Very common. It's when EKMS Ch material is not listed on a local element or user inventory, but documentation exists at the main account level saying it was issued to them.
Can you give me an analogy for that?
Sure. Think of the main EKMS Ch account as the central bank ledger, and all the LEs, the local elements, are like the local branch checkbooks. If the central bank ledger shows a transfer of funds, in this case, keying material, but the local branch checkbook never recorded the deposit, the two inventories just don't align.
And the gap means you can't be sure where the material is.
Exactly. The command as a whole cannot definitively locate that material. It doesn't mean it's compromised, but the system of control is broken. It makes it impossible to perform an effective spot check.
So to recap this first section, the first 4 PDSs are rooted in what seems like tedious paperwork.
Right.
But the consequences are huge. You're talking about a broken chain of custody and even potential spillage incidents.
That's it.
Let's move on then. PDSs 5 through 7. These deal with physical handling and some pretty strict timing rules.
Right. And PDS number 5 introduces our first major time-based rule, which is a big one for exams.
What is it?
It's the issue of keying material in hard copy form that's marked or designated 0YPTO without authorization to an LE more than 30 days before its effective period.
30 days. That's the magic number. Why is that specific window so critical for hard copy material?
Well, hard copy material, the old paper key tape, is inherently more vulnerable than electronic material.
Because it's a physical object you have to protect.
It's a physical object. It has to be stored in a safe, just sitting there waiting to be used. If you issue that highly sensitive CRPTO material 31 days out, it's sitting in the LE's safe for an extra day longer than necessary.
And every extra day is extra risk.
Every extra day increases the risk of inadvertent exposure, fire, theft, or compromise before the material is even needed for operations. The 30-day rule is a policy mechanism designed to force account managers to minimize that physical exposure window.
Makes sense. Okay, PDS number 6 covers protective packaging. Removal of keying material from its protective packaging prior to issue for use, or removing it without authorization.
The packaging is your security assurance. It's often tamper evident. If you break that seal prematurely, you have permanently compromised the assurance that the material has not been accessed.
But I see a note here in the material. There's an exception.
There is. And for policy memo writers, this is critical. It's Article 769.g, Note 1. It says that if the premature removal of packaging was thoroughly documented and there was absolutely no reason to suspect malicious access or espionage, it might not be a PDS.
But the key is documentation.
The documentation is your shield. If it's sloppy or if the intent is unclear, it absolutely counts as a PDS.
That's a perfect distinction. The goal isn't just to keep the material safe, but to be able to prove it's safe.
Precisely.
PDS number 7 deals with what happens when the material arrives at your command. Receipt of a package with a damaged outer wrapper, but an intact inner wrapper.
This is that nested security concept, like Russian dolls.
Yeah.
The outer wrapper protects the physical integrity during shipping.
Right.
If it's damaged, the handling procedure somewhere along the line was flawed. That's a PDS. But the inner wrapper is the last line of defense for the key material itself.
So as long as that inner wrapper is okay, the material is considered secure.
We presume no compromise has occurred, yes. And that distinction saves you from having to file a full EKMS incident report, which would be mandatory if the inner wrapper was also breached.
So to quickly recap this part, PDSs 5, 6, and 7 are all about respecting the physical barriers, the 30-day time barrier, the tamper-evident packaging, and the dual wrapper to prevent exposure before the material is even operational.
You've got it.
Now, we shift into what the material calls systemic failures, the equipment, logs, and password policies. These seem to show a breakdown in maintaining the functional security of the whole environment. We're talking PDSs 8 through 14.
Right. And here's where it gets really interesting, because now we're talking about failures involving the hardware and the encryption devices themselves.
Okay, lay it on me. PDS number 8.
Activation of the anti-tamper mechanism on EKMS equipment, or an unexplained zeroization of that equipment.
But with a big caveat.
A huge caveat.
Yeah.
As long as there were no other indications of unauthorized access or penetration.
Okay, so the anti-tamper mechanism is basically the device's internal suicide switch, right?
That's a great way to put it, yeah. It's designed to wipe or zeroize all the classified keys if it detects an intrusion or even just a physical shock.
So if this happens because of something like a power surge or maybe a failing internal battery, and there's no evidence of someone trying to break in,
It's classified as unexplained zeroization
but why is that only a PDS? It sounds like it should be an incident.
because the classified material is safe.
Oh, because it successfully destroyed itself.
It did its job, it zeroized itself. The failure is the unexplained nature of the event. That points to a latent operational vulnerability. You have to document it as a PDS and investigate the cause.
But if you found pry marks on the case,
Oh, then it's a completely different story. If there were physical signs of forced entry or any reasonable suspicion of external access, that investigation immediately escalates to a full Article 945 COAM-SEC incident.
got it. Okay, PDS number 9 covers the logbooks for remote key management. Failure to maintain OTAT logs. We hear these acronyms all the time. Can you break them down?
Sure. OTAD, OTAR, and OTAT. It stands for over-the-air distribution, rekeying, and transfer.
So this is how you push keys to devices out in the field remotely.
Exactly. It's a critical capability for rapid operational changes. If you fail to maintain those logs, you lose the digital paper trail.
And you can't prove who got what key and when.
You can't prove who received the key, when they got it, or whether the transfer was even successful. This log failure means an auditor can't verify the proper distribution of your electronic key inventory, which makes it a critical control gap.
Okay, now we get to the operational compliance issues. These seem like the ones that generate the most inspection findings. PDSs 10 and 11 are all about recurring actions.
This is where you should dedicate your study time, because these are the time-based compliance failures that are just the easiest for an auditor to find.
So PDS number 10.
Failure to perform product rekeys annually or more frequently for specific devices like a KP, that's a key processor, or STESIPE products.
So the annual rekey mandate is there to ensure the cryptographic lifecycle is maintained. But PDS 11, that's the one about password and PIN management. This looks like the real compliance nightmare, and it's all centered on the 90-day cycle.
The 90-day cycle is the definition of operational friction, I know, but it is absolute policy, and we're talking about the highest privilege access points here.
Like what?
First, failure to update and properly record your LMD or MGC passwords, that's your root, sysadmin operator passwords, every 90 days.
And what are LMD and MGC?
The local management device and the main generating component. These are the command and control nodes for your entire key distribution system. If these powerful accounts aren't rotated every 90 days, you are failing the minimum security standard.
Okay, what else falls under this 90-day rule?
Next is the failure to change key CIKS pins every 90 days or more frequently. The CIKs, or cryptographic ignition keys, are the physical or electronic keys that literally start the cryptographic engine.
So if the PIN protecting that key isn't rotated,
the vulnerability window just gets wider and wider. And finally, just failing to properly maintain the KP-CIKP log. If you change the password but you don't log it, the failure is twofold. You have no record.
so if I miss my 90-day password rotation by a single day, I have just generated a documented PDS, even if I have perfect material accountability otherwise.
That's it. The policy prioritizes the systemic hygiene of the network. The failure is the administrative lapse itself, independent of whether a malicious actor ever took advantage of it.
Wow. Okay, moving on to the accounting support systems. PDS number 12. Failure to perform LCMS backups or archives. What's LCMS?
LCMS is the local, SEC management software. It is your official book of record for everything you own.
So if LCMS is the authoritative source for your entire inventory, what happens if the system crashes?
Well, without a proper scheduled backup, your entire accountability record is instantly gone. It just vanishes.
And you can't prove what you own anymore.
Not only can you not prove what you own, but your ability to generate, transfer, or destroy electronic keys locally is completely halted. This PDS is directly related to operational readiness and disaster recovery.
PDS number 13 seems to be about data contamination. Discovery of non-COMESI accountable material in LCMS.
Right. LCMS is meant for one thing: controlled cryptographic items, or CCIs, and accountable keying material. That's it.
So what are people doing wrong?
They start inputting local inventories for things like standard servers or unclassified items, whatever. They're injecting noise into a pristine system. It dilutes the integrity of the accountability process and makes it harder for the automated system and for auditors to verify the status of the critical material.
And finally, in this section, PDS number 14 raises a critical point about low-level items, loss or finding of unclassified material.
Yeah, and this one trips people up. while losing, say, an unclassified manual doesn't compromise a classified system.
But the failure to control that item is still a PDS.
It is. It indicates a laxity in custody, a procedural failure, and the procedural consequence here is key. You must still contact NCMS, the National EKMS Management System, to get disposition instructions or process a loss memorandum.
So even if it's unclassified, it's not outside the accountability system.
Not at all.
Okay, let's recap this section. PDSs concerning the digital side of the house often revolve around that strict 90-day password cycle, the annual rekey mandate, and just maintaining the logs and backups for your critical management software like LCMS.
That's a perfect summary.
All right, we're now moving toward failures concerning timeliness and inventory oversight. These are issues that show a failure to keep the national and local inventory systems synchronized. We're looking at PDSs 15 through 24.
Right, and PDS number 15 establishes another one of those critical time windows. This one is for material receipt.
Was it the rule?
Failure to report receipt of COMSS material or corrupt bulk encrypted transactions, we call them BETs, within 3 business days of receipt or download.
3 business days. Why is that deadline so absolute?
Because when material is shipped, either physically or electronically, the national COMSC system marks it as in transit or pending receipt.
So there's a record of it being in limbo.
Exactly. If you fail to acknowledge that you've received it within 72 hours, the national system, NCMS, it loses visibility on that material's status. It creates a gap in the national supply chain accuracy.
And what about the bits, the bulk encrypted transactions?
Those are huge digital packages of key data. If they arrive corrupted, you must still report the problem immediately so the transmitting authority can track the failure and resend it.
Got it. PDS 16 is about mandatory self-correction. Failure to conduct, document, submit, and retain annual self-assessments or required spot checks.
These are your command's own internal audits. They're mandated. If you fail to perform them, you're effectively operating blind. The PDS isn't the error you might have found during the check.
It's the failure to even look for errors.
Exactly. It's a failure of a required administrative control.
PDS 17 sets a threshold for reporting equipment downtime. Failure to report LMDKP failures of 07 days or greater in duration via record message.
Yeah, and the question is, why 7 days?
Why 7 days?
Because a sustained failure of a week or more in your local management device or your key processor, that represents a significant degradation in your operational capability. You can't manage, distribute, or generate keying material correctly.
So it affects your readiness.
It does, and that mandates external communication via a formal record message. Not because the material is compromised, but because your sustained lack of capability requires external awareness up the chain.
That makes sense. Okay, PDS number 18 is crucial because this one really distinguishes between a PDS and a full-blown incident.
It's a very sharp line. This is the loss of user CIKs for INES or devices which make use of CIK.
Remind us what a CIK is again.
The cryptographic ignition key. It's the access token. If you lose just the CIK, it's bad, but it's a PDS. You can zeroize the device remotely or remove the CIK's association from the system.
But there's a big however here.
A very big one. If the associated device is also lost or is possibly accessible to unauthorized personnel, the risk of an outsider pairing the key if they find it with the device if they find it immediately elevates the whole issue.
And that triggers a full COMSC incident report.
A full report per Article 945.e, yes.
So the key takeaway there is that the material itself is less important than the potential for an unauthorized pairing of key and device. Why is that distinction so critical to the NSA?
It's critical because the NSA has to assume that a lost key will eventually be found by someone.
Okay.
The risk is manageable if the corresponding device is securely locked away. But if both the key and the lock are potentially accessible to an adversary, the risk shifts from a theoretical accountability gap to a very real, actionable compromise vector. The system is designed to trigger that full incident report based on the potential for hostile pairing.
Not just a simple loss. Wow. Okay, and PDS 19 just reinforces that. Failure to inventory affiliated fill device CIKS during inventories. Accountability has to be paired.
It has to be.
PDS 20 deals with leadership changeover. Failure of a local element to conduct, document, and retain inventories for change of command or change of LE issuing.
This is just liability management 101, right? The incoming leader has to sign a clean inventory. That establishes their baseline of accountability. If that paperwork is missing, both the old and the new leaders are operating in this gray area, hence PDS.
And PDS 21 just broadens that requirement to the whole account.
Exactly. Failure to conduct, document, and reconcile your account-level inventories within the specified timeframes. You have to make sure your internal records perfectly match the national records.
PDS 22 covers accidental destruction. Inadvertent destruction of non-NATO material when resupply is not required.
Simple enough. You made a mistake, you destroyed something you shouldn't have, but you don't need a replacement, so there's no immediate operational impact.
And you just document it locally.
You document it locally per Article 1005.b, and it stays a PDS.
PDS 23 handles the opposite failure, late destruction of non-NATO electronic key.
Again, this is a PDS. You missed the destruction deadline. It's an administrative failure. However, and we have to stress this distinction again.
What's the escalation here?
Late destruction of physical COMISEC material, or any destruction error that involves NATO material, that immediately escalates to a full COMISEC incident report.
So electronic material gets a little more grace. Why?
Because electronic material is easier to wipe securely, and it's generally less susceptible to physical exploitation than, say, a paper tape or some other hard media. So the policy offers a slight procedural difference before it requires that big external report.
Okay, finally, PDS 24. This seems similar to PDS 8, dealing with a hardware failure.
It is. Discovery of a software design device in a benign tampered condition due to battery depletion.
So, as we discussed, these devices rely on battery power to protect their volatile memory. If the battery dies, it triggers the anti-tamper mechanism.
Right. And it's considered benign because we know the root cause was just battery failure, but it's still a PDS because it represents a failure of maintenance.
And the key distinction?
The key distinction is, if you received the device already in a tampered condition, or if there are other unexplained signs of tamper before the battery died, that escalates the issue to a full report per Article 945.
We've made it through the non-reportable list. And the complexity really is in the details, isn't it?
Because
That 3-day receipt window, the 7-day LMD failure threshold, the 90-day password rule, and that really specific distinction between physical and electronic material destruction failures.
the overarching theme is that procedural discipline is what prevents escalation.
Okay, so knowing what a PDS is only half the battle.
It's only half. The other half is knowing how to document and report it exactly as mandated by the policy. If you document it correctly, you minimize the liability.
First, let's nail down the internal requirements for all those non-reportable PDSs. What does the CO expect to see on their desk?
The documentation must be at the unit level, reported to the CO via a formal memorandum. The guide even provides a sample, Figure 10.1, and this memo is your procedural defense. It needs 5 key components.
Okay, what are they?
1. A policy reference. You have to reference the foundational policy documents, like EKMS 1. This establishes the regulatory context for what happened.
2.
2. Discovery details. State the date and location of the discovery. For example, discovered during a CO's spot check on this date.
3. The deficiency itself.
Right, a detailed deficiency description. Don't just say reports were wrong. Say 2 accounting reports were not signed by 2 required personnel, citing the specific transaction numbers. Specificity is everything.
That was number 4.
Corrective action. Detail what you did to fix it, which often requires a full review of all active accounting reports to identify any other similar deficiencies. It shows you're doing proactive root cause analysis.
And finally,
Affixing the memo. A copy of that memorandum has to be physically attached to the affected accounting reports themselves. This completes the paper trail, making sure the correction is permanently noted right alongside the original mistake.
that is rigorous.
Yeah.
It forces the command to fix not just the individual error, but to check for systemic failures too.
It does.
Okay, now let's hit the climax of this policy discussion. Defining the reportable PDSs and the mandatory external reporting rules under Article 1010.
Right. We're shifting now to the 3 critical cases that absolutely demand external awareness. And the first procedural requirement for all 3 of these is the speed of reporting.
How fast?
PDSs must be documented locally and reported externally as applicable no later than 72 hours from the time of discovery. That 3-day window is absolute.
Okay, case 1. PDS 1005 Bug B1. Erroneous confirmation of destruction. So the material wasn't actually destroyed, but the LCMS system thinks it was.
This is a failure of accountability data integrity. The physical world where the key material still exists contradicts the electronic world, where LCMS says it's gone.
And that's a reportable PDS because it messes up the national accounting system.
It completely undermines the accuracy of the national accounting system. Yeah, it raises the potential for auditors to flag that material as completely lost.
And what's the procedural nuance here that saves this from being a full COMESIC incident?
It's all about what the person who found the error did immediately after. If they corrected the physical destruction report by lining out and initialing the material that was not destroyed, they followed the procedural save.
They fixed the paper record.
They fixed the paper record. If they failed to do that, that failure is then considered a full COMESOC incident. The policy rewards procedural rigor in correcting the error on the spot.
Okay, the required content for this external report looks intense. Who do you notify?
The report is typically a record message. It's addressed TO, NCMS in Washington, D.C., and ENFO, Comnavifer in Suffolk, and others in your chain of command. And it needs 4 mandatory components.
Which are?
1, identification, your EKMS ID number. 2, contact, a unit point of contact. 3, circumstances, a detailed description of how the erroneous confirmation happened. And 4, correction, the measures you took to make sure it never happens again.
Got it. Case 2. PDS 1005 by B2. Unauthorized adjustment of pre-configured default password parameters.
This failure compromises the administrative security baseline of the system itself. For example, changing the default number of lockout attempts for the LMD system password.
So you're weakening the system's own defenses.
You are. And because these changes affect the fundamental access controls to the key management system, external awareness is mandatory.
And this report requires some extra detail tailored to the security compromise, right?
Yes. In addition to those standard 4 components, you have to provide 2 crucial analytical pieces. First, the cause of the non-compliance. Why were the parameters changed?
Just a second.
An estimate of the length of time of non-compliance. This is a huge policy memo focus. External authorities need to know the duration of the security vulnerability window, the time during which those weakened parameters were active.
Makes sense. Okay, finally, case 3. PDS 1005.V3. Inadvertent destruction of non-NATO material requiring resupply.
This is the operational consequence escalation of that PDS we talked about earlier. Accidental destruction is a failure.
But if that failure creates a hole in your operational inventory, that must be filled by national assets.
Then it becomes externally reportable because it now impacts the national resource pool.
And the required content for this third case, I assume, addresses that resource management aspect.
Correct. Along with the standard 4 components, you must specifically state if the destruction report has already been submitted to Tier 1, which is the next level of accountability. And if so, you provide the date and transaction number. This lets NCMS verify the destruction event in their system while they're simultaneously authorizing the resupply action.
So to summarize the reportable PDSs, they're the ones that impact national inventory, administrative security baselines, or resource management. And they all demand notification within 72 hours, with specific details focusing on that vulnerability window and corrective action.
That's it in a nutshell.
Okay, let's conclude with an area that often confuses new local elements. How to handle material that is technically EKMS Ch, but it lacks any classification. This is governed by Article 1015. This raises an important question for me. If it's unclassified, why does the policy treat its loss as a security issue at all?
Because the accountability system governs all material, regardless of classification. A failure to control any item that is part of the EKMS Ch suite demonstrates a breakdown in the custody process. It's a procedural failure.
And the source confirms the status of this is a non-reportable PDS?
That's right. It's non-reportable.
So no 72-hour external message is required. But you still have to coordinate externally, don't you?
Exactly. NCMS must be contacted. Your required action is to coordinate with the National EKMS Ch management system to get a replacement for the missing item or to obtain disposition instructions for a found item.
So it's about keeping the national inventory accurate, even for the unclassified stuff.
That's the goal, keeping the national inventory of controlled hardware and manuals accurate.
So what kind of material falls under this umbrella of unclassified EKMS Ch material?
There are 3 main types. First, unclassified EKMS Ch equipment and related devices that are not designated CCI.
What's CCI?
Controlled cryptographic item. It basically means it contains the classified crypto logic. So if it's just the device shell or peripheral, but not CCI, it falls here.
Okay, what's the second type?
Unclassified EKMS Ch related information. Think publications, maintenance manuals, operating instructions, the supporting documents.
And the third?
Unclassified keying material that is not marked or designated CRPTO. This might be, say, a functional testing key
Mhm.
or a key used for training environments that carries no inherent classified content.
Okay, so to start this coordination with NCMS, even for an unclassified manual, the request has to be formal. What does that letter or facsimile need to contain?
Rigorous identification is necessary for NCMS to process the request. You submit it formally to NCMS and the CMIO, and it has to contain 4 key pieces of information.
Let's hear 'em.
1, your EKMS ID number. 2, the identity of the material short title, edition, serial number, and the controlling authority. 3, if applicable, the date you need the material by. And 4, the delivery specification. Tell them how you want to get it. Specify the delivery service or indicate you'll do an over-the-counter pickup from a CMIO.
So the lesson here is that even losing a basic manual triggers a high-level structured request process. Procedural rigor is the absolute baseline, no matter the classification level.
It is the absolute baseline.
All right. We have successfully navigated the 23 non-reportable PDSs and the 3 critical reportable procedures. The core lesson here, it seems to me, is that in the security environment, proper documentation often outweighs the severity of the initial error.
It really does. And if we connect all this to the bigger picture, understanding PDSs is not about memorizing 23 rules. It's about ingraining procedural discipline.
And timeliness.
Timeliness is everything. The 72 hours for external reporting, the 90 days for password rotations, the 30 days for pre-issue material, the 3 days for receipt acknowledgement. That is the most measurable and often the most critical currency of ComSec compliance.
We've broken down what feels like a chaotic inventory of errors into a structured framework. It's based on escalating risk and these mandatory time cycles. The difference between passing an audit and triggering a national incident often just comes down to that internal documentation.
Writing that memo and affixing it correctly or hitting that 72-hour deadline, it's all about maintaining control over the narrative of your material's safety. Failure to control the process is seen as tantamount to a security risk because a weak process just invites compromise.
Okay, a final thought for our learner. Consider the single most common mundane practice in your routine, the one you are most likely to skip at 4:30 p.m. on a Friday. Is it checking that the safe combination is properly secured? Is it making sure 2 people witness the monthly inventory? If late destruction of non-NATO electronic material is a documented PDS, what simple act of exhaustion or distraction could cause you to generate a finding in the next 24 hours? The real challenge isn't learning these complex rules, it's making their extraordinary discipline absolutely routine.